Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, a weekly podcast discussing innovative ideas in business and technology from unconventional and often overlooked sources. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with the other host.
Wyatt Carson. Tanner, this is the first time we've been alone without an interview for seems like a long time. Just you and me, buddy.
We've been interviewing for the last 6, 7+ episodes, and we haven't had time to really just talk about ourselves, what we've been up to, and how life's been. So it's a good time to catch up.
A month and a half of interviews. It's been a whirlwind. It's been a blast, hasn't it, though?
It's nice not to have to think of any potential original ideas and just rely on others for that. So that's been pretty good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've met some amazing people in the last month and a half, last 2 months or so. Met some really fascinating people that, I hope everyone who's listening has listened to those interviews because most of those people are going to be people that you should look up to, you should admire, you should look into what they're doing and how they're doing it because they've dropped some serious wisdom on us and things. I've taken tons of notes from our last
Yeah, we'll
guests.
have to do a series just talking about the highlights and what we got from that and the whole thing. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. But things have been crazy in both the Lytle and the Carson household lately. Yeah, you're prepping to travel a little bit for work. I've been perpetually sick in some shape or form. Um, you're coming to Omaha tomorrow.
Now that the snows are melting, I can get out of my basement and see the real world again. So really excited to see a bunch of clients and people face to face and try to, yeah, leave the dungeon that is my basement and venture out to the real world.
I hear that. I've had an interesting couple weeks. I don't know how long it's been because it's been such. It seems like it's been a lifetime. So as you may know, I broke my foot like a month and a half, 2 months ago, something like that, and then I got put in a boot. And then walking on that boot, I traveled to New York 2 or 3 times during that period, and walking on the boot hurt my other hip. All of this kind of snowballed into I injured my lower back. And that lower back injury, because I'm getting old, apparently also triggered my sciatic nerve down my left leg. So I was immense back pain. I had this crazy nerve pain I've never experienced in my life. It was so painful. And then a couple days into that, I talked to my wife. I was like, hey, not to be weird, I need you to look at my thigh, right? Nothing, no, nothing being weird here. But I had this kind of essentially a rash. And my wife, ex nurse, was like, yeah, that's definitely shingles. You need to go to a doctor. So I went to a doctor, and within 2 seconds of looking at my thigh, they're like, yep, that's shingles. So I had an injured back, a crazy sciatic nerve gone crazy, my sciatic nerve gone crazy, and I got shingles, which apparently you don't normally get until you're like 50 or older. So in the last month, I found myself on like 5 crazy medications, some of them very strong, and I'm nothing more than like a daily vitamin supplement kind of guy. And I'm taking some crazy stuff that like, don't drink, don't do anything on it, and I like to have my beer, don't get me wrong, but uh, man, it's just been this February has just been kind of a disaster for Wyatt personally. My poor wife and children have had to deal with me in some form of broken for the last month. It's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, it's crazy once one thing happens, how it can just snowball down into so much more.
So, Tanner, what's on your mind tonight? What would you like to talk about?
I think we can kick off first. We had shared our story with about Founders University. We now just completed that course last week, so we want to recap what some of the top takeaways were from it and kind of just our overall experience.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Will you recap what Founders U is for those who may not know?
Yeah, so Founders University is a 12-week course for startup founders, hence Founder University. It's brought on by Jason Calacanis and the team at Launch, and they are a private investment firm looking to invest in technology startups. And this is a really neat way for them to, one, educate people into the proper ways of doing things and getting in the ground floor. So if there is a potential idea or company or startup that's worth investing in, they will bring them into their umbrella and give them that initial seed money to get them kickstarted. So we got taught by a bunch of each week, every Monday, we got taught by a series of really great instructors, some startup founders, some people from launch. Jason himself had taught one of the initial kickoff course and then had jumped in on some of our midweek check-ins. And yeah, it's just a really neat foundational understanding of what's needed to do a startup in today's market. And especially with how the investment landscape has changed with the economy changing, it's been really important to understand your fundamentals and not just kind of ride the wave of low interest and free credit and unlimited investment money that was going on for a few years. And now it's really buckle down, bootstrap, do things the right way. In many ways too, they talked about when not to take money, holding back until you're ready. And that was one of the examples we'll touch on. But yeah, kind of give me your initial thoughts of anything I missed or what you thought about too.
No, that I think that was one of the biggest pieces of what I got out of it was how the whole process of seeking venture capital works, and how it feels like it's really controlled and tight while at the same time being very nebulous and a risk for the investor. And you start seeing it from both ends. I think that's what Founders U provided a lot for me, is from a founder perspective as well as a venture capitalist perspective. What do they want to see? If I come up with this idea that I think is a multi-million dollar, $100 million idea, what steps do I need to take to get it in front of to pitch it to the individuals who have the money, the capital to invest in it? And what do they need out of it? It's not just always about the founder. And we think, once again, we talk about everyone has a great business idea, but a lot of people think they have a multi-million dollar business idea. But until you really understand what a venture capitalist wants to see and wants to understand to invest in you, you don't know anything. We're talking the pitch decks and the valuations and the projected income, and there's a million different pieces of the puzzle that you need to put in place before you even ever pitch to a VC firm. And that was probably one of the biggest learnings from me, is that the people who have this kind of money, what do they want to see out of a founder? Not just a great idea, but momentum and possibility.
One of the big understandings too is just like everything in life, it's all about managing risk. So whether you're doing something small in your life, you might make judgment about how risky that is for you, how much you have to invest to buy something or do take a leap on a new opportunity or a new investment or a new career, any of those things. And you're always weighing the odds. And like you were saying, everyone always has an idea, but they don't realize the risk that's involved with the people who are maybe willing to invest in you. And you have a lot of social capital with like your friends and family, and you might be able to raise some initial funds that way. But when you are an outside trying to bring in someone who's on the outside, they don't know you. They can only see what you have done and what you can show them, not what you can tell them. And so that too is something for me where you always hear the stories of Silicon Valley. Someone came in with a great pitch and an idea, and they raised millions of dollars and became some unicorn. It exited at 10,000%. But reality is, the people who go in and pitch with just an idea, they're a known commodity. They're in the inner circle with those people. They've proven maybe once or multiple times before that they have the chops to actually execute on those. So it's not a risk for those investment firms to take that leap and give them money because they know that they have gold in that person. And some me off the street or you off the street or anybody else, they don't know. And you really have to do your due diligence and make it as obvious as possible to even get just a little amount of money from somebody, and then all of the requirements and responsibilities that go on from there.
I'm a big fan of the TV show Shark Tank. I'm sure lots of people have watched it, but the individuals who pitch on Shark Tank, none of them are people with just an idea. You don't get in front of the Shark Tank without customers, sometimes thousands of customers already, and distribution plans and deals with major manufacturers. The people who get to that kind of venture capitalist, um, they're already off and running. They're in a second, third, fourth stage of funding. What Founders U did for us was teach us how that first round of funding really goes. And to go from, I have a good idea, to pitching it in front of your first round venture capitalists. Uh, there's a lot that goes into it. You wouldn't believe, and this is more than just having a business plan. This is projected growth. This is how you're going to fund it, how you make money in the business, how much you've spent on, your capital before then. There's so many pieces just to get to your first stage, $25,000 worth of investment. And when you get to like your third or fourth seed, you can be in the millions, tens of millions of dollars. What is it? ChatGPT came in at like $500 million, right? But those are what we call unicorns. Those are those rare and special cases. Most businesses that get to pitch are not in the tens of millions of dollars in valuation already. Sometimes they're much, much lower. But seeing all of the teachers, all of the presenters was great. But the biggest win in Founders University, in my opinion, was the community. How many people we connected with. We interviewed many of them over the last month and a half we were talking about. Met some great people. Met some people who are killing it in life and some people who hope they are in the near future. And you fit right in with them. And it's a judgment-free zone. No idea is a bad idea in that community. And that's really what was powerful for me.
Yeah, I absolutely love the people. And that was part of the final survey I talked about, just the connections that I made, the how I want to continue doing those things and how I would love to do more with them. And my only feedback, and this kind of touches on a later subject for this podcast, but I wanted more opportunity to meet them face to face, not just virtually. And I know their first class, they had the option to go to San Francisco and an office and meet with everybody, but we weren't kind of in the club yet. And so I almost wish that they had that opportunity at the end as well, because that's something that I valued a lot, and I probably would have been willing to travel to and just to meet some people and experience that ending piece too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. Moving stuff here. But that brings me to an excellent caveat for our next discussion. So Tanner, in our Discord friends group, you shared an article over the last couple days here, and it was an article from NPR, Nebraska Public Radio, kind of PBS for everyone else, whether you're in Nebraska or not. And the article was a study: commuting has an upside, and remote workers may be missing out. And you shared this article rather benignly, without any pretense or anything like that. But I think the response you gathered from me and the rest of our friends group was very much in agreement that this article screamed of, shall I just say it, propaganda? So let me explain a little bit more. So that the article was about how the commute to work and back can be mentally beneficial for the average American. Okay, I'll bite and I'll read into it. And it was talking about having that time to decompress after the workday before you get home and all of that stuff. It just reeked, because I've worked from home for 2 years, 2.5 years now. And the very concept of me going to work in an office, absolutely just like, bleh, no, thank you. Hard pass, right? What are your thoughts,
Yeah.
Tanner?
So first of all, NPR is National Public Radio.
It's not National, it's Nebraska. Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably
Never
your
mind.
brain cloud still happening from the drugs.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So major publication, nonprofit organization based out of Washington D.C. that has huge influence over the narrative of what's going on. And I first saw this where they were talking about the benefits of commuting, and I just think to Office Space, the intro of that movie where he's just stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. And my initial response was that of like almost repulsion just to the idea. It's just what could be good about it. But we'll read some quick little excerpts from it, and then we can talk about what the article maybe has right or has some good ideas, and then where, like you said, I feel like this is just pure gaslighting propaganda. It's so just it starts off with saying, for most American workers who commute, the trip to and from the office takes nearly one full hour a day, 26 minutes each way on average, with 7.7% of workers spending 2 or more hours on the road. I'm going to stop right there because when I lived out of town, I lived on the south side of Kearney, Nebraska, and I had to commute to the north side. And it took me about a half hour to get to work. So I always had to factor in on my longer days an extra hour essentially of getting to and from work. And not because it was an insanely long distance, but just because how traffic was laid out at the time and the million stoplights and my ability to hit every single red light imaginable. But when you were working in the office, how long was your commute?
Yeah, so here in Omaha, my commute was probably 20 minutes, but at one point in my life, I worked when I lived in Denver. I worked up in the mountains, and my commute was about an hour each way. So 2 hours of commuting in a total day. So it adds up fast, essentially, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, 40, 20, 30, it all adds up when you really put the math to it. You do this 5 times a day or 5 times a week. I apologize. 4 weeks in a month, et cetera. It expands out. That 20, 30, 45, 60 minutes of commute adds up really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I've worked a few places out of town as well. I worked in Oberlin, Kansas for a while, which is around a little over a half hour from McCook. And I worked in Cambridge, Nebraska, which is a little over half hour from them. So those drives are a little bit different though, because it's open highway. It's a little bit more time to decompress, and it's not this contentious stop go looking for people trying to merge into traffic. So that we can touch on that a little bit more. But to continue the article, many people think commuting is a chore and a waste of time. Raise hand, guilty here. Um, However, during the remote work surge resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, several journalists curiously noted that people were, could it be, missing their commutes? One woman told the Washington Post that even though she was working from home, she regularly sat in her car in her driveway at the end of a workday in an attempt to carve out some personal time and mark the transition from work to non work roles. As management scholars who study interface between people's work and personal lives, we thought to understand what is it that people missed when their commutes suddenly disappeared. So I can understand this part myself, and this is probably one of the bigger things with the remote work from home lifestyle that I struggled with the most is that barrier between what is at home and what is at work. So, what do you do, Wyatt, to kind of separate that space and give yourself a transition time between, family time and work time?
So I would say I don't typically have a transition time at the end of the day. At the start of the day, so my kids leave for the bus at 8 a.m. At 8 a.m., they are out the door to the bus stop, which is at the end of our block. Um, Sometimes I'll go out and watch them, which will take an extra 5, 10 minutes of my time. Sometimes not, depending on meetings in the morning. But once the kids are gone, the house is quiet. I go down into my basement. My basement is cut off from everyone else. Pets aren't allowed down here, anything like that. It's my own quiet area to get work done. I would say, though, at about 5 o'clock at the end of the day, whenever that is, I really just, Windows L, lock my computer and walk upstairs. I don't have a decompression period, and I feel I need less of a decompression time and more as a kind of a build up. So in the morning, getting ready and getting in the right mindset is more important to me than changing mindsets from work Wyatt to dad or husband Wyatt. So I, that's the thing that kind of bugged me with this article the most is that it really made a generalized statement about everyone. And I think it's very different for every person. I don't need a decompress time, but I do need a build up time. I need to get into a work mindset. But at 5 o'clock or whenever I'm done with work, I can lock my computer and go upstairs and that's it. And instead of having a 40-minute commute, uh, I'm there. I'm home. I'll help make dinner. I'll help do the dishes. I'll help the kids with homework, whatever the situation is. Um, the the kind of generalization, the blanket statements this article puts on commuters is probably my biggest
Hmm.
pet peeve with this whole thing.
Yeah. In the next paragraph, they talk about the concept of a liminal space, a time free
Hmm.
from both home and work roles that provide an opportunity to recover from work and mentally switch gears to home life. For me, I use walks. So I'm a big proponent. I finish up work between around 4 to 5 o'clock. I usually start work around 7 each morning.
Hmm.
But once it's time to pack up, I leave my basement. I go outside, irregardless of how cold and crappy it is. Uh, Recently, we had a winter storm, and it's snow piles up everywhere, mucky streets, ice. I still go for my walks. If it's really bad, I won't take the dog because he turns into a wet, dirty mess, and that's the problem of having a long-haired white dog. But on nicer days, he'll always go with me, and I spend around an hour to hit that decompression. But rather than just spending money on gasoline, sitting in a car, being forced to do that, this is an opportunity for one to me get fresh air, sunlight. I can listen to music, or I often do audiobooks or different things to really help progress my mind. But more importantly, I get exercise. I burn a lot of extra calories. I build up some extra energy, and I get to do something that's productive. And the whole concept to me, that at least this initial spot of the article talks about, is that people are that sitting in a car commuting can substitute for something that you could find that would be more valuable, such as exercise, and especially something as good as going for a walk. I'm not a huge fan
Hmm.
of jogs myself. I know some people are. I'm as Mr. Low impact as possible when it comes to doing a lot of different exercises there, but in about 45 minutes to an hour, you can get about 4 miles at a
Sure.
normal pace, and it's just so valuable. And then you also, once you form that habit, you really start to crave that time away, and that helps you decompress. But also, when you're physically exhausted, you're ready to stop the walk and then go home and cook and do healthier things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to be fair, um, since working from home, I've really picked up. I usually go to the gym in the morning, usually pretty early before anyone's up, and that's my time. That's Wyatt time, so to speak. Um, but this article talks about you're missing out on these opportunities to listen to podcasts or listen to your own music, or I don't know about you, but most days, I won't say all because that's not fair. Most days, I'm not actively in 8 hours, 9 hours of meetings. Um, I listen to music all the time while I'm at work. Another article that was written by who is it? It's Flex Jobs, the website Flex Jobs, which specialized in remote work jobs even before the pandemic. They wrote an article that said working from home has saved on average the American worker $12,000 a year. So let's just talk about financial impacts of not commuting. That's not gas, wear on your vehicle, oil changes, tune ups. That's also wardrobe. A lot of American workers have scaled back on their work essential, business casual, whatever workwear, whether you're female or male. You have to buy regular clothes and keep that updated. Lunches, coffees, snacks, all of these things add up. And according to Flex Jobs, the average is $12,000 gained in your pocket a year by not having to drive to work. Now, one thing that I wanted to bring up is I've seen from many, many companies in my role, my daily job, I've seen from many, many companies a view from the most senior people, CEOs, saying, one company, I won't say the name, of course. Specifically, I heard the CEO said, "I'm bleeping paying for the building, so we're going to bleep and use it." That was that CEO's justification for the return to the office order he demanded upon his staff. As you can imagine, it didn't go well. And as we see more companies doing that, Amazon is doing it, for example. Lots of tech companies are starting to implement the return to the office work order, despite 2.5 years of seeing successful growth in the company by everyone working from home. So I'm just not buying into it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think to give the article some credit, they're they're trying to address something, which is the whole detachment from the workday and how it bleeds into there. The way they're doing it, though, is they're trying to hold on to some archaic concept that was just a negative for all the benefits that being in an office had. So there are a lot of benefits for working in an office, just like there are a lot of benefits working from home. But the commute is on the con side. And trying to make it something that's a bonus is just feels very disingenuous to me. So going back to what they were saying, like finding something that's a commute like experience, it's no, let's shed that skin of this old habit and let's go back to first principles and find what is something that's meaningful for you, fulfilling for you, that could be productive and worth to do that time to give you the same effect. So if you need to decompress, you need to transition from work, you could look at yourself on what you want to do and find an alternative that is actually productive for you. Um, Again, just the concept of just sitting in the car does not feel like a productive use of your time. You could use that to sit in a very comfortable chair in the quiet and meditate. You could use that to read. You could use that to, again, spend time, like walk the dog, have your own time, play with kids, do anything other than just the equivalent of sitting in a car driving. And this is a guy who tomorrow is probably going to be in the car for 5, 6 hours traveling. And I enjoy traveling, but it's for a purpose, not for, in this article's case, just trying to solve an answer or solve something that, and the answer is just mediocre. Um, Touching on the, kind of the pros and cons of remote work, I used our favorite tool. This one isn't ChatGPT, but I got access to Notion's AI system, which is really fun. So I just asked it to write a quick pros and cons list for remote work. I'll start with a pro, and you can talk about how it's affected your life and your situation, and then we'll go to the con, and we'll do that a couple times if that's all right with you. So, one of the pros for remote work is increased flexibility. You kind of touched on this a little bit already, but how has that improved your life or affected your life?
The flexibility agreed in terms of work-life balance. If I get a call from my kid's school that my kid is sick, it's a lot easier working from home to just go get my kid than being across downtown Omaha, which could be 30, 45 minutes away from where I live. Um, Flexibility for me personally, how I interpret that is flexibility to make work a part of my life, but not my entire life. Does that make sense? Sometimes when you commute and you're far away in an office for at least 8, 9 hours a day, you're there, like it or not. You are in this building, you are in this cubicle, and the remote work has given me the feeling and the ability to be a bit more involved, I think. So I might be jumping the gun on that one, but
No, I think you're good there. Again, the flexibility for me comes into if something comes up and I need to, run to the doctor's office or take the dog to the
mhm.
vet or take the dog to the groomers, if I need to take my break, run to the store because we're missing something for dinner that night, I have the flexibility to do that. And I can jump in and I can work hard. I don't get all the same distractions that you would have in an office. And ultimately, I can get my work done very effectively. So I really appreciate the flexibility that work from home can bring there.
Agreed.
So one of the cons, potential for isolation.
So that is a big deal for a lot of people. I've talked with a lot of individuals. I've worked with a lot of individuals who have talked about this. My own brother, Ryan, has talked about this. For some people, since the pandemic and since remote work became a go-to, a lot of very social people have felt left out. Um, Now, I agree with the statement, but only slightly in the sense that my personality was never the kind of person who was going to use work as a social event. I tend to be more introverted person. I like to kind of be to myself. I would be the person in the office with headphones in so no one could talk to me. So when I went home and I could then listen to my music without headphones. It was a game changer for me. But for some people, they crave that connection and that socialness. So that statement I agree with, only on the concept that there are people out there who thrive in more social environments than myself.
And this is one of the things for me where I feel like it's a company's duty to make sure that the foundation for remote workers is equal to that of those who may be in the office or who were in the office. I had a discussion with some people recently who they made the transition over, not to full remote employees, like people outside of the local community, but they did have those that could work in the office a few days a week and work from home if they need to. And it was kind of a flex between both. And their big thing was trying to make sure that the culture and the communication and everything was set up to allow that type of flexibility. And many companies don't think about the ramifications from, again, going down to that core first principle foundational value of what is needed to give equal opportunity, equal experience to everybody, regardless of their location. And they've just kind of go off of can often go off of the old ways of doing things, which were built around a certain set of incentives and cues and all of these things that were built for the office, but don't translate over to the virtual world. And I've seen this some in my work where it was easy just to pop over and have a conversation with somebody, or someone was having a hard time. You could leave the office and go for a coffee together and have that intimate talk to get recharged and do whatever. And those don't translate over nearly as well to a Teams call. Even it just doesn't have that same effect. We are very social beings, and so it is a very hard thing to do to replicate that experience. And in many ways, what I worry about as it becomes more and more common, even within myself, is that oftentimes your career can become a little bit more transactional rather than a little bit more strengthened in terms of the relationships that you can form. And I'm a realist. I understand that business is business and that you want to keep those separate. You're an employee providing value, you know, to them, they're providing value to you. And once those situations maybe aren't as equal, one or both could terminate that at any given point. So I'm not living in some quote, we're a family type dimension by any means, but it is hard where you don't have that same level of commitment or same level of devotion because you had to either move yourself to a place or you're rooted in that community and you're going to that job as to the same degree if all you need to do to change your job is just change what laptop you're using or change the VPN. And so that's a big thing that I worry about is just if you yourself are alone and everyone else has that dynamics, you're really not going to form the same level of relationships and connections. And that too can feed into the feeling of isolation.
I see what you're saying, but I think it goes back to your previous point of businesses can do a better job
Mm-hmm.
of setting this foundation beforehand. My current company I've been with over a year now. I have been promoted, I have been recognized, and I've never met a single one of these people except for random people when I travel for work. I've never met my boss. I've never met my boss's boss. But the company I work for, their foundation is rooted in this kind of spread out, sphere of influence where my company's based out of Minneapolis, for example. I am the only person in my company, and my company's not small. I'm the only person in my company in the state of Nebraska. I know there's some people in Iowa and some in Kansas, kind of around the area, but the company grew up this way, or at the very least, quickly adjusted to the new way of working. I think the theory that those who go into the office are going to have more opportunity than those who work remotely shows a failure in that company in setting the right precedent and setting the right culture. Um, because promotions are, while promotions understandably traditionally are very based on connections. Don't get me wrong, and I've tried my hardest to make connections at my company. the concept of face to face being more impactful than the value of your work or the skills you possess that can benefit the company. It's a flawed way of looking at it, I believe. And companies who still would look at that from that perspective are probably very behind on the times at the moment.
Yeah, I go back to thinking about it's all about process and systems. And so again, if
Hmm.
you're thinking just like you talked about your company is thinking about remote first, and I know a lot of technology companies that are saying their people spread all across the world, they get together through technology platforms and not necessarily physical connections. Um, but what is some of the systems you feel that help your company make that transition or have made it successful? Because again, I feel like a lot of companies don't have that clear plan and are just kind of winging it, and that's really where they're falling short.
Hmm. Not to be aggrandizing here, but we are called decentralized opportunity.
Hmm.
And exactly what we're talking about today is decentralized opportunities. And I think when a company recognizes the ability for a workforce to provide more value outside of what's within their immediate metropolitan area, when a company can realize that there's other value out there, maybe it's a rural area, maybe it's some tech recruiting company who decides to hire this guy out of McCook, Nebraska, you know, they took a leap on that and they said, hey, maybe we don't own everyone with these perfect skills right here in this metropolitan area. If we expand out, if we decentralize and accept people from all over different walks of life, we can get the we can get all of those check boxes in the job description done. Um, Once again, my company's based in Minneapolis, so I'll stick with them. If my company had said, no, we don't need another Wyatt Carson because we're in Minneapolis and we have everyone we could ever possibly need, they would probably be sorely missing. Not saying I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread in my company, but I believe my company gets value out of me that they couldn't have immediately found in their own area. And when companies start recognizing that as valuable and not as a potential concern or a security concern, or what if this person lies to me, just taking it at face value of there are people out there with the skills we need that check off every box in our job description. Once companies realize that, they can be truly decentralized and they're off like a rocket because they have what they need.
Hmm.
So I think that's it. Just it. I think my personal company recognized the ability to get skills and assets that they couldn't immediately find in their network. And once COVID hit, that became an asset for that company. They succeeded where other companies of a similar type did not. And I think that's where we're at right now. We're kind of at this edge, this precipice, if you will, this inflection point where is the answer a fully remote workforce from here on out? Or should it be return to office and go back to the normal way of working, or somewhere in between? I think that's what the US is trying to figure out right now.
Yeah. So you touched on actually the next pro that I was going to hit, which was the access to a broader range of job opportunities or talent. But I just want to
Hmm.
step back into, the idea of why people fall into isolation or have some of these other cons that will just reach out because I don't want to spend all night on this, but
Sure.
there's lack of clear boundaries, there's risk of
Hmm.
burnout, there's the loss of supervision and guidance. And to me, so much of this just comes back to lack of proper planning, foundations, and building of systems of those in the company. And
Yeah.
our last class, actually, at Founders University, was talking about building this system that you would share with investors that was basically I come from the IT world as kind of like a business continuity plan in some sense. It's
Sure.
the overarching like guidance system for your company. And with that, I was just amazed and inspired by the amount of detail that they want companies to put in there because they want you to think through all the different steps in the process. And so many
Hmm.
companies I know just wing it. They're fly by the seat of their pants. We'll figure it out when we need to. We'll do these things. And again, you get a lot of leeway when you are in person because you can ask someone to do something that's maybe outside of their job description. You can work with them one on one to help get them up, even though you don't have this properly documented and trained. You can, and then the next time that happens, if you don't properly document it and train it, that person can see the next person who's struggling and then just intuitively help them out. And you can get away with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a fully remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, at least, you need to have that core foundation of systems and processes and measurements and be able to train your workforce, manage expectations, monitor, measure, and really work with them so they feel valuable. And I think that is at its heart what most companies are failing with remote, because it's a damn lot of work that you got to do.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Uh, my entire job is based off of processes. I'm a process improvement consultant, and thinking about it, you bring up a really good point I haven't considered, is that the companies that are probably failing at the remote work sphere probably don't have solid processes in place, trained, documented, for reviewed. It has been kind of that tacit knowledge within someone's head. One of my favorite questions to ask a company is, how long would it take to get this person, insert whatever department, fully functional and providing value for the team? And some people are like 6 months, some people are like 1 year. I'm a firm believer that if it takes more than 3 months to train someone to do their job, your processes are bad. I'll take that to the grave any day. Because like I said, you bring up a really great point. I think every company I've worked with over the last like 2 years in the remote post-COVID, during COVID world, the ones who struggle the most are the ones who don't have documented processes. And maybe that's a takeaway for some businesses. Maybe that's something they should focus on, because it's very easy to get a remote workforce when that remote workforce knows what to do, who to go to if they have questions, when to do it, and the next steps of the process, instead of trying to figure it out or have a senior person, job shadow that person for a while. That's not always valuable in a remote workforce. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting thought.
And I think there's a big difference between being micromanaged and measured. So
Sure.
that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing, is there's a lot of distrust, especially because with COVID, so many businesses were forced to become work from home
Mm-hmm.
businesses or fully remote businesses. I would say the majority who that were forced to do something that were capable of having work from home work did that, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe started seeing the potential of adding some better talent from outside. And so now they have a mix of fully remote workforce, hybrid workforce, and on premise. But again, because it was such a crazy time and they were forced into it, they didn't have that proper planning, the proper systems, the
Yeah.
proper foundation that's needed. And that's why they're struggling and starting to see that pushback. And especially for managers, maybe who are used to most of their career being that person who could stop by the desk and chit chat and figure out what's going on and really enjoyed helping people one on one and doing those things,
Mm-hmm.
they are now flung into a system where they're blind, because not only do they not have the systems in place, they have no way to measure if people are actually producing. And most companies that I talk to are scared that their employees aren't working and they're just paying them to
Yeah.
sit at home and watch Netflix. And so that just goes back to, again, this micromanaging sense. Well, if this guy is remote, I'm going to then monitor everything that they're doing, not measure, but monitor everything they're doing, and then start nipping at them when they don't live to my standards. And that's just
Yeah.
a recipe for burnout. That's a recipe for losing great talent and just
Mm-hmm.
causing a very toxic culture.
One thing I've seen in that exact sphere, and this is something I've seen in industries before COVID, was one of the most over measured jobs in the world are call centers, like customer support centers. They are the most measured individuals you will ever meet in any industry, any sphere. They are measured down to the second of what they're doing. At any time, someone could be listening onto their call and they have no idea. And if you take 5 seconds longer explaining XYZ, you could be docked a point. You get so many points, you could lose your job. Call center employees are some of the most fascinating people to kind of look at from a very 10,000 foot perspective, because once they went remote, management had to rely solely on their systems and data and dashboards. Says, oh, this person was 30 seconds over time, or blah 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 blah, and they would let people go for what was considered a metric violation in the call center world. And then probably a year into the pandemic, there was a giant shortage of individuals working for call centers, because suddenly, say I'm a call center employee, I get sent to work remotely and I do just fine. I do my job just as always. But I get too many check marks for my timing and they fire me. I find out that there's a whole world of remote jobs that will appreciate me for me and maybe not track every second of my day. And suddenly there are call centers who are hurting. But I digress, because you brought up another point I really wanted to hit on. I read an article today that reminded me of exactly what you said. I think one of the hardest hit populations since COVID forced so many companies to go work from home is middle management. And I'm going to say this from a middle management perspective. I am a middle manager in my career, in my company. Um, in Lean, the founder of Lean, his name is Taiichi Ono, and he used to work for Toyota, and he kind of invented the Lean manufacturing process. And Taiichi Ono was famous for lots of things, but one of them was his belief that no company should ever have managers. He said, in no way, shape, or form does a manager add value. Defining value add for the company. A manager doesn't add value to the product or service that is being provided to customers ever. A manager's job is to make sure people are doing their jobs, and that's a double check. That's a quality issue. The entire job of a manager, myself included, is waste, according to this Taiichi Ono, who invented lean manufacturing. Um, and I have seen so many managers looking for new jobs since COVID forced work from home. And I bet, as a recruiter, you yourself, Tanner, have seen many, many old managers looking for new employment, because they're suddenly finding that maybe micromanagement is not valuable. Maybe these people are able to meet, the necessary metrics or goals without someone over their back or looking over them over a cubicle now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I've actually just saw recently where someone left a management position to become an individual contributor, just because of, again, of all the changes, the restructuring, and what's needed. And there's now, especially with the tools and technology we have, you have so much more authority and capability as an individual contributor than you would being caught perhaps within a bureaucracy of being a middle manager. Because there's a benefit of being a leader, right? To making decisions and driving the company forward and having the authority, and as well as the responsibility on your shoulders to do that. But then there's the rung in below that, or even below that, or even below that, depending, where you're just answering to somebody. And this really comes back to measurement metrics. You're accountable to somebody who's accountable to somebody, and you're just trying to hit numbers. And I wanted to touch on that because you hit it with the call center. It is so important to have the right measurables to deliver on what you actually want to do. And this always goes back to incentives, right? If you are incentivizing a certain action, well, you're going to get that result. But is that the result that you ultimately want? And is that the best result to do it? And I think about, these call centers, you have to have, oh, you have to have so many interactions. They have to be this time. And why? What is that ultimately doing? And could this be done in a more effective way to either increase, a customer retention, the lifetime value of your customer? Could you be doing it in more effective ways to build up better social capital and build up your brand? There's all these different methodologies. And when you, again, this is just a poor thing of designing systems. If you design it poorly, you're going to get poor results. And so just looking back, if you're, have your own company, or if you are in a leadership position, or even if you're a middle manager or an individual contributor, questioning, why is this measurable? Is it tight? Evaluating it, and is it in alignment with our bigger goals? And because ultimately, with a remote workforce, you're getting a certain amount of leverage of output, and you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. So, and one of the benefits here in the pros column of remote work is higher productivity, and I fully believe that. There is, when I am locked in, I don't have all the distractions because I am one of those social butterflies and I'll talk to people for hours. When I'm locked in, I have my headphones on. I am outreaching. I'm typing something. I'm building up lists. I'm building up search things, or I'm making phone calls, or I'm doing all these things. I am an undistracted machine, and I look up and I realize, man, I am starving, and it's because it's 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten. And it is an amazing thing. And so, if you unleash this now new power into your own organization, but you do it poorly, well, then you're just wasting money and you're wasting that energy and that output. So,
Hmm. No, absolutely. But once again, I think the work from home, the work from home, the mass work from home has done a wonders for making people realize that there's multiple different types of workers.
mhm.
I can say just today's Tuesday, um, I got to work on time. I put my head down, and from like 8 till noon, I was just in the zone. I killed it today. In fact, I sat back once. I was like, hey, good job, Wyatt. Pat myself on the back. Like, killed it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some days where I have many, many distractions working from home. But it's also a personality thing. What's even more distracting to me than being in my basement? Having a million people around cubicles walking around wanting to
Mhm.
talk to me about the upcoming holiday party. To me, not interested. I have I don't see the value. And I think it's allowed people to kind of recognize that there are different personalities, there are different types of workers out there. Not everyone can fit into the same mold. We realized it with education. You can't teach children all the exact same way and expect them to gain the same thing. It's the same for adult workers. Adult learning is a science in itself. And what I've personally learned from adult learning is that there's no such thing as one type of adult. We're all very unique individuals. We all work different ways. So where
Mhm.
one social extrovert might just succeed in a cubicle type environment, I find that just cringy and gross and have zero desire to ever go back.
Yeah.
So um,
So let's make a
higher
case.
productivity. Let's higher productivity. I don't buy that. What's the data on that?
Well, I would
That
say
that would be my answer.
higher productivity for remote work is what they were
Oh, I'm
saying.
sorry. I thought you said the return for
N-
work. I
no,
understand now.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, we're
Okay.
still on the pros of remote work.
Gotcha.
And like
Gotcha.
it is exactly what you said. It's the you don't have all of the distractions
Yeah.
because oftentimes because you're at work physically doesn't mean that you're mentally at work. And I would wager, and this kind of backed up with how in science with how much deep work or flow a person can do. And on average, most people can do 3 to 4 hours of deep work a day. You can look at authors and writers and artists, and they pour themselves into that work and they can do it for 3 to 4 hours. If you're really trained, you can get a little bit longer. So you got to figure most office workers, I would say knowledge workers, they're not really dedicating themselves that hard. So you're really getting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at best of productive work, and the rest is just this filler. And we'll touch in some of the in a future episode a little bit how AI I feel is going to disrupt a lot of that filler work and show who's actually productive and who's not. But it's just having the ability to not have all those distractions does give you the capability then to focus harder. And even if your productivity is 10% higher, that's huge ramifications for a business. So I want to, as we're approaching an hour here, make the case for why you should return to the office or when you should return to the office. And for me, and in all the conversations I've been having with, some local CEOs or HR directors and different stuff, the biggest case for return to the office is, of course, you're working with something that's tangible. You're working with people. So if you're in healthcare, for example, patients need help. If you're building physical goods, you have all these things that require people to be on site serving whatever their duties are. And there is an argument to be made that the knowledge workers within those systems provide a certain benefit in the community for working in those offices as well. So it depends on the type of work you're doing, but it is good for a business who is centrally focused around something that requires the majority of their workforce to be physically on premises, to have the rest of their support systems, the people who support them, also there in the office. If if again we talk about access to talent and things like that, but there is a huge part of that, and then that will tie in your local culture. That can tie into benefits within your local community, especially within a rural community, and the importance of that. So I had a part of the conversation, I guess, and you can touch on it, is there is the have and the have nots if you don't do that. If you have the people, let's say it's healthcare, and you have a nursing staff that on a snow day, they have to make the trek to come into the office, when you have the office workers who can just log in from home and do their work. That can, from what I've been told and what I've kind of experienced in my own life prior, that could lead to certain forms of resentment. That can lead to some feelings of inequity and some discontent. So, what are your thoughts?
Sure. No, so that's a great point. So I worked for a manufacturing plant once, but I was management. I was part of the management team of a manufacturing plant. And so on a daily basis, I was working with individuals who, they worked their time at a machine, they're getting sweaty, they have to follow all these safety protocols. And then there's me who, unless I was out on the floor, I sat in my air conditioned office at my computer. And I started thinking about this as like, gosh, why don't they see me as an equal? Well, I'm sitting here in my air conditioned office with my own coffee maker, and they have very strict times. And oh, it's now 2 o'clock. Here's your 15-minute break. Be back in 15. I didn't have to worry about that stuff. And I started to realize that I was getting very detached from the general workforce. And in terms of remote work, that's got to be even stronger. Could you imagine a manufacturing plant where the people who actually built the product, who actually provided value for the company, had to work, had to go in person, but management could stay at home and work from the computer? What kind of message would that send? So I think that's a great example. Um, Healthcare, manufacturing, hospitality, places where human beings are essential to the product or service being built. I agree with your statement that it should be across the board, and by not making it across the board, you are just inviting inequity and resentment across your workforce. So, um, that really made me think. That's a good perspective, Tanner.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think that's a great place to lead it since we're hitting at an hour. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to continue to think hard on this subject. It's a huge part of what's happening in Nebraska. I'm actually going to be speaking this May for the Nebraska Hospital Association at their spring forum on this specific subject. So if you are a listener and you're part of a company or running your own company, and you're thinking about this too, or you've dealt with certain strategies, what work and what hasn't, please reach out to us, because I would love to talk to you and find what systems have been helpful, what was just a catastrophic failure, all of these different things, because I really want to share, not only on this podcast, but with all of our communities and our leaders and our people who are really the foundation, our hospitals, of what they can do to best enable um, access to talent, which is harder and harder for these rural communities to gain access to, but also understand, you know, what's perhaps a false flag or a bad path to lead down by just opening their doors but not being fully ready for that. So, again, if you're thinking about this subject and you have some experience with it, please shoot us an email, decentralizedopportunity@gmail.com. I'd love to talk with you more. But past that, we really appreciate everyone who's been listening. It's been fantastic on these last, I guess,
Yeah.
18 episodes now.
Yeah, 18, go us. But seriously, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, through email, please reach out to us. All of our connections will be linked in the show notes here. You can find us on your major socials. Reach out to us, talk to us, ask us a question. tell me something you'd like us to talk about. We would love to get some interaction and start sharing some of the audience viewpoints. We love the interaction we're getting. So let's keep it up.
Yep.
That'd be great.
And we are going to be building some communities on different platforms such as Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and I think LinkedIn. Wyatt's on the taking the lead on these things. So we'll be posting some information here soon.
Mm-hmm.
We've been also doing some rebranding, trying to get
Yeah.
those. And then hopefully, once I get some time, I will get our website fully going. I am so far behind on that, and I apologize to everybody for that. So I'll make it a mission here within the next 2 weeks, because this week's going to be absolutely chaotic for me. Within the next 2 weeks, I'll have something posted for our podcast online where you can go to past episodes, view it on our website, get links to all the different platforms, and just try to take us to this next notch up in terms of the professionalism that we can bring to you.
Absolutely. We're trying to get better for you guys and for us, and expect some big changes to come. We're really dedicated to this podcast. We really enjoy it, and we want to see it grow.
Mhm.
So, yeah, more to come, definitely.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone who made it to the end. We will see you all next week.